Right. Speaking of basketball, let's bring the man in. If you don't know who this man is, you need to get underneath the rock that you've been living on. That's Keith Pompey, Sixers insider, Philadelphia Inquirer, Locked On Sixers. If you don't, if you follow the Sixers even a little bit, you know who Keith is. Keith, thank you for joining us again.
The
All right,
man.
man. Yeah, all right, my $3,000 check is in the mail, bro. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Anytime. Like I said, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I have a lot of Sixers questions, like many other. I'm sure. I almost feel panicky at this point. I guess a lot of Sixers fans have, and because there's always been a move or a chip or something that we could do. We had something of some sort of value that we'd be willing to give up. Even at Ben Simmons, even though the value of whatever it is with him, but like it just feels like they're in a rock and a hard place. And I'm going to start off with real quick with James Harden. We hear the Rockets thing. We hear, all this different scenarios. What are your feelings and percentages that James Harden's a Sixer next year?
Wow, that's tough with the percentages. I would say right now, I would probably say 80% that he's going to be a Sixer next year. And the reason being is I think like a month ago, I would have said 99% that he was going to be a Houston Rocket. And it switched, right? But the reason why it switched is when you look at it, I feel like, everybody's saying James is going to Houston, James is going to Houston. And then all of a sudden, I remember when Jalen Green was on that Paul George podcast, and it was like, Paul George was like, hey, man, you sure you want to play with him? He's going to have the ball. And then that's like, and I know Jalen Green was being cool about it, but to me, it's kind of sort of like, it's getting out there that some of the players probably don't want to play with him, right? Another thing is, I think that the Sixers were kind of sort of like, hey, yeah, James could get 4 years, 217 mil, but we're not trying to break the bank. We're not going to do it. We're not going to, mess up our short and long term future, right? That's what they said, right? So when that happened, then all of a sudden you hear stuff coming out of Houston that the Rockets are saying, hey, we don't want to give up a lot of years either. So with all that, it's like it seems like things are changing a little bit. And with that being said, I feel like he's going to remain a 76er. I do. I
Yeah.
could be wrong, but I feel like he's going to be a 76er.
And real quick, guys, before we move on, just a little insider information. It looks like they're going to be calling this game, and it might be pushed to September into that series for the Phillies and Braves. So stick with us. Let's talk with Keith. Talk Sixers. Go ahead, Fred.
Piggybacking off your Harden question, Al, and I agree with everything you said, Keith. What I could never understand, even the rumors in Christmas, like who's going to give him a max deal from significant money. So my question is, he's got the player option for 35 mil next year. What do you think is on the table for James Harden to come back to the Sixers or go elsewhere? Because I feel like 35 is even high.
Yeah, it's kind of high, but I think that when you look at it and you look at some of the things that he gave up, talking about, he gave up 15 million to opt out, right? Well, he did actually get an extra year too, right? So that's kind of cool. But I feel like maybe, something in the 40 range, like maybe 40, 48. Like, and I know that sounds crazy, but what I'm thinking about is the money that he gave up. And like, so if you give him, if you give him 2 years, 48 per, it's kind of like, look, we're thanking you for what you did. Because, if he didn't take that money, they wouldn't have, they wouldn't be able to sign PJ Tucker. They wouldn't get Daniel House, things like that. So I feel like you give him the money to basically thank him for what he did, in my opinion. Like 2 years, 48 plus per.
Gotcha. And then my last Harden question anyway. I think some Sixers fans fail to realize he did disappear in 7 and the end of 6, but they might have gotten swept if it wasn't for those 2 games where he dropped 40 plus. What do you know about Harden as like a locker room guy? Like I feel like he half the season he played one way, kind of like what Doc said, but do the players actually like him? Do they like that he went to Vegas? Do they care? Or is it seemed like when Joel won the MVP, it was all they were loving on each other, everyone was happy, and then it seems like little inklings come out sometimes about not wanting to play with James.
Here's the thing about James. Like, I will tell you this. Like, all right, I'm gonna give you an example, and then I never wrote about this or anything like that, so I'm just sharing it here. I remember we were in the locker room at one game, after a game, and James and Maxie were talking. It was on the road, and where was it? I believe it was. It was on the. I forget exactly where it was, but in Indiana. We were in Indiana, and that's the game that Maxie had a huge game, right? And afterwards, Maxie was like, "I love playing with you, James." And like James was joking with him, and like Maxie was like, "Yeah, man, like you make it so much easier for me, right? And you get me the ball in the right spots." And then I heard stories like last summer, young guys. One guy in particular, well, one guy he couldn't make it because he had something where James was flying his teammates into Houston, paying for it so they could work out with him. And then not only that, like if he knew that they had some type of not hobby, but if they like speaking to kids or like urban inner city kids or like doing book reading and stuff like that. Like I heard James was setting them up with people in Houston to do that while they were there. So they love him. The thing about James Harden is, yes, he goes to Vegas, he does all this other stuff, but he's been doing that his whole career. So it's kind of sort of like, and the person who he did it the most with those 9 years in Houston, Daryl Morey, is here in Philly. So it ain't changing. Like, you know what I mean? It's just not going to change. And another thing I will say this, at practice, now maybe some people might say he needs to rest, but I've never seen anyone go as hard after practice, like doing drills and stuff like that, in my 10 years of covering the Sixers than James Harden. Seriously, never seen anyone. Shoot arounds, practices, he's always the last person out of the gym. So with that being said, it's like I think it's one of those things where you got a guy, on the court, he's going to be a leader, he's going to do what he has to do. But you also know that my man's going to party. He's going to get it in. He's going to have a good time. But it's not one of those things where he's late for practice or he doesn't want to practice. It's like he gets up. I guess he works hard and he plays hard. If that's how you want to describe it.
Sure. I mean, I always said I don't care what he does, and he's having fun as long as he shows up for the game, and it's not the reason his game's it became hindered in any which way. But let's look at the other side of the coin with Joel Embiid. Here's a guy that got a lot of criticism after games 6 and 7 as well. People have already talked about, hey, let's just move on, let's blow it up, let's send him out, let's move on from him. I know that's not going to happen, and why would you want that to happen? But my question to you is, if the Sixers can't, and it seems like they're kind of stuck in that rock and the hard place, maybe make any big moves to move forward, could Joel Embiid, we always said his window with his health could be an issue, but his window of wanting to be here in Philly and maybe wanting to move on and win a championship somewhere else, is that window begin to shrink even smaller and quicker than we thought?
It could. I mean, I think the 76ers have to be, even if he doesn't say it, if I'm Daryl Morey and you have to be a little bit on notice, right? You have to. Because when you look at Joel Embiid right now, Joel Embiid is he's in the same class they say as Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? Those are the three stars right now, like leading stars of the league. They are. It's their time. Like LeBron is getting older, KD is getting older, and it's their time. All three of them have won MVP, but the other two won championships. So when we think about legacy, in order for Joel Embiid to be on the same level as them when it's all said and done, is all about getting that ring. And then it's going to come to a point where he's going to really want that ring, and he's looking like, yo, I'm playing my hardest, but all we keep doing is getting second round exits. So if I'm the 76ers, the worst thing is going to happen is he's asking for a trade. And nowadays, let's think about it. Back in the day, it was taboo for a star player to say, I want out, right? It was like, you don't do that. Nowadays, they do it so often to where it's one of those things where you can just be like, people aren't feeling sorry. I mean, they're not going to feel bad for you. They're going to feel sorry for you, saying, yo, y'all need to get Joel a ring. That's just how it is.
You got 675 Craig over here calling Keith Pompey, the legend himself. Yeah, it's good to have Keith back on talking 76ers. Again, if you don't know where Keith's at, it's Locked On 76ers, his daily podcast, as well as Philadelphia Inquirer, and of course at Pompey on Sixers on Twitter. Go ahead, Fred.
Let's switch. I have so much Embiid stuff, but I gotta go forward. Let's go forward to Nick Nurse, a totally new style, and I guess it's kind of an Embiid question as well. He typically has not had a center of Joel Embiid's ilk. He had Marc Gasol a little bit towards the end, but not Embiid's game at all. How do you see Joel Embiid fitting in that? And then secondly, what players do you think are going to benefit from Nick Nurse's system?
I mean, let me answer the second question first. I mean, I feel like, to believe it or not, I feel like two players will. I feel like Tyrese Maxey, and I feel like Tobias Harris if he remains, right? Like, I really do. And the reason being is when you look at the Toronto Raptors and you look at their guys, we talked about long, athletic fours who can guard different positions or play different positions. You look at Tobias Harris, a long, athletic power forward. I mean, that's what he is. He is a power forward. So I feel like, Nick Nurse can unlock certain things in Tobias that he did on Pascal Siakam. When right now we're sitting right here, if you ask me who's a better player, I'm gonna say Pascal. I'm gonna just say it, right? But when we go back to when they played in a couple, like 4 years ago, when Tobias first came here in the playoff series, Tobias was by far the better player at that point. But Nick Nurse developed Pascal and got him in right situations to where he can become a versatile player. And I also think that Tyrese Maxey can develop under him. He can take another step, another leap. Right now we look at him and we just say, get him the ball up court, do certain things. But I think that what Nick Nurse can do is he can take advantage of his strengths and just make him a better, more well-rounded player. In regards to Joel Embiid, it's intriguing to me because when we think of one coach who's had the most success against one player, against Joel Embiid, it was Nick Nurse, right? I mean, there was games, and I know he had Marc Gasol, but then Valanciunas used to do things to Embiid too, right? So it was always those things. Now in the
Even
playoffs,
Siakam,
even Siakam. And it's a way that Nick he guarded. He figured out a way to guard Embiid. And then, Doc took him out this year and had him, at the foul line doing stuff like that. But to me, Nick Nurse is a great coach. And if a guy knows, he was Embiid's kryptonite, so to speak, right? So if you're the kryptonite, you know what his weaknesses are. So you also have to know what his strengths are as well. So I feel like Nick Nurse is going to put Embiid in a lot of great situations moving forward.
And since we'll stay on the Nick Nurse conversation, one thing Doc Rivers really didn't do is work with the young guys very often. And do you think after, seeing, like you said, helping Maxey take that next step forward, Jaden Springer, we all saw the video of the 100 threes out of 121. Do you think with Nick Nurse at the helm, they'll be bringing up that youth movement a little bit more?
I think so, but I also think it has a lot to do with their roster as well, right? We look at it, they have a lot of free agents. Some guys will go elsewhere where they think where they can make more money. A couple of them. And then also when we look at it, they don't have a lot of money to go out and get other players, right? And you look at Jaden Springer's progression. He has progressed a lot. We saw him what he did the second to last game of the season. He was a G League Finals MVP. He led the league, the G League in steals. So I feel like he's a guy. I'm not saying he's going to be the sixth or seventh man, but I could see him being at least being in the back of the rotation, getting minutes, right? But I also think that's going to be a little bit out of necessity, but it's also going to give him an opportunity to grow, right? The one thing that I will say about Nick Nurse is he got a lot of flack this year because people felt like he didn't develop the young guys in Toronto this past season. But I think a lot of it had to do with you look at that roster, the team was struggling. Nick Nurse was like, "Look, man, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to win,"
They
and
ain't it.
he and that ain't like like
You
we
picked
don't
the wrong guy.
yeah. We don't have time. We don't have time to go through growing pains, bro. I'm trying to win. This is on my clock. So I think that's what a lot of that was.
Couple quick questions, real quick. Montrose Howard opted out, which if everybody goes to Philadelphia Inquirer,
Hallelujah! 2.7. I was
Yeah.
so scared he was going to opt in and just sit on the bench with that 2.7 mil. Sorry to cut you off, Al.
No, but you're right. I think anybody in the NBA, any fan of basketball, would have thought Montrose Harrell was going to opt in to get. He wasn't going to get 2.7 million anywhere else, but he opted out. A, how shocked are you? And B, how crazy is Montrose Howard?
You know what? I'm one of the guys who think that I wasn't really shocked. Now I had a couple people from around the league or agents call me and was like, "He did what? Come on, man!" But see, to me, I feel like when you look at Montrez, and Montrez waited to like the 11th hour to do it, right? To me, it comes down and it says like, "Look, what's going to be my role here? If I sit the bench another year, this could be it. Like if I don't get to play." So you look at teams like the Phoenix Suns. They went out there and like all their money goes to 5 players. They're going to have to sign a lot of minimum salary contracts. So there's going to be other teams like that. So Montrez is looking at it like, hey, I read the room. People told me I could probably get a minimum salary contract at another team. I'd rather go there and be a backup big as opposed to being a third string big, and I'm not going to play because it looks like right now you got Embiid as the first string. Then you're going to have Paul Reed. He's a restricted free agent. He's probably going to come back. So with that being said, where does that stand for Montrez? It's like, yeah, I'm gonna get 2.7, but I'll be out of the league next year. But if I go somewhere else and I play, I'm gonna get the minimum, but at the same time, I'll probably get some playing time. So to me, I wasn't shocked, and I felt like it was probably if he talked to teams and he got an idea that he can get it, then it makes sense, in my opinion.
Draft night's tomorrow night. There's rumors the Sixers are trying to get into the second round. Are there any prospects that we can kind of just take a look at that they might be targeting, or is it kind of like no idea because they don't have a pick? So why put in effort into it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not one of those. I think they can go a lot of different ways because when you look at this roster, and I really haven't put a lot of like effort into it, to be honest with you, saying like, hey, studying these guys, because
Yeah.
when it goes to the second round, it could be anything. Like it could be a dude from France, it could be like a dude on like who played with whatever his name is, like the dude who's going to
Yeah.
be number one,
Number
right?
one.
Yeah, I mean, I like, it is a lot, but I do think that the 76ers would benefit from getting like another 3 and D type of guy or from a second round pick. But I think that if they do that, they'll have a lot of options because this is a top heavy draft. But there's going to be a lot of with that, but there's also going to be some guys that are going to slide. And depending on where the Sixers pick, or get, if they can, trade into, I think that they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Just piggybacking off that, then, assuming we don't get anyone free agency wise, specifically Seth Curry, do you think they'll target him? And who out there do you think they can put together with the minimal money they have?
I don't think they can afford Seth Curry. I just don't. Like, right now they're not gonna, like, they're over the cap, right? The best thing they can do is try to trade for him if they can. But I don't even know if Brooklyn wants to deal with Daryl Morey after the last trade, right? Like, I don't know if they want to. But I think that Seth Curry is a guy who, you think about it, when he came to the 76ers, he was a bench player. He was with the Sixers and he was a starter and he played well for them. I feel like he's going to be a guy that's going to get paid. Like, I do. I think he's going to get paid. I'm not saying a max salary or anything like that, but I think that he's going to make more money than what the Sixers want. And then also, we got to understand something. Does he really want to come back to the Sixers? Like, this is a team, he went there because his father-in-law was the coach. His father-in-law traded for him, right? And then next thing you know, Daryl Morey trades him, and then he fires his father-in-law. So, like, it's like, like, that's a tough conversation to have with the wife, to say, babe, I want to go play for the team that not only traded us, but then fired your pop. So I don't see that one.
Good point. Is there anyone out there? You could probably not, because you said the cap, it has to be trade. So.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Like, I mean, like, someone, like, there could be some people that they can get, like, on the minimum or something like that. And those things tend to pan out or play out, like, a little later on. But as far as, like, I hear a lot of people talking about big name players and stuff like that. That ain't happening. Like, it's just not. They just don't have it. They don't have it. Now, you can trade Tobias Harris and try to, get some quality role players and stuff like that. But outside of that, I don't see it happening.
All right, guys, his name's Keith Pompey, as if you didn't know that already. You can find him at Locked On 76ers Daily Podcast. If you haven't been reading him, it's almost a daily thing for me to go on his Twitter or go to PhiladelphiaInquirer.com and read his stuff. And follow him on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers. Keith, anything you're up to that you want to plug before you head out?
Nah, man, I'm just chilling. That's it. That's it. That's it.
I love Keith.
I love having you on, man. Can't wait to talk to you again. Appreciate you as always.
And thanks for having me on, fellas. And I'm glad y'all reached out to me to come on. I really enjoyed being on here talking to y'all.
Cool. Oh, man, I appreciate you. Have a great day, Keith. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, peace, fellas. Bye.